He says that Babylon will never be built again. If somebody could come and build Babylon again, that would prove God wrong, wouldn't it? And there have been teams in the past that have decided to rebuild Babylon to prove that God is wrong, to prove that we cannot trust His word. And all of those people have failed. One of those men that failed was a man by the name, and we all know him very well, Saddam Hussein. You see, Saddam Hussein believed that he was the great grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. Because where is Babylon? Where is the ancient city of Babylon? It's in Iraq, just near Baghdad, of course, of which Saddam Hussein was the king or the ruler. He decided he wanted to rebuild Babylon and set himself up as the new King Nebuchadnezzar. There's some pictures on our screen here. We find that across the nation, he put up these big billboards picturing himself as the next King Nebuchadnezzar, to rebuild the great empire of Babylon. There's a picture there of him looking into the face of old King Nebuchadnezzar. In the background is the ancient city of Babylon and the Ishtar Gate, picturing himself as the new Nebuchadnezzar, wanting to prove God wrong, wanting to set himself up as the new king of Babylon. He tried to rebuild it. He tried to re-establish it. But something took place in the last few years that stopped the plans of Saddam Hussein. Now what you see on the screen here is some photographs. You see, Saddam Hussein was well on the way to rebuilding the ancient city of Babylon. These photographs on the screen were taken from a US Army helicopter. They were only on the internet for about 2 days, I was told, and a friend of mine got them before they were taken off. And these photographs show us the pictures of what was taking place over there in Iraq, of Saddam Hussein rebuilding Babylon. You'll notice the walls are being rebuilt there. You notice in the background on this particular photo there's a palace on top of the hill. That was to be his new palace. Around that palace was new gardens. That was to be the new hanging gardens of Babylon. But Saddam Hussein's plan to defy the God of heaven, to prove the Bible wrong, to be the next King Nebuchadnezzar, got stopped suddenly by a man by the name of George W. Bush. And we all know the story of what's taken place over there in the last couple of years, how America has been at war with Iraq, and basically Iraq is decimated. Saddam Hussein's plans to be the next king of Babylon, to prove the word of God wrong, to raise up the kingdom of Babylon again, have been squashed, and they will never ever come to fruition, because Saddam Hussein himself, of course, is now dead. Friends, when God speaks, it will come to pass. Man can plan to rebuild Babylon. Man can plan to do whatever he likes. But friends, when God speaks, it takes place. It's as simple as that. We can trust the word of God. God has allowed himself to be tested for 2,500 years, and still Babylon has never been rebuilt. Let's get back to our study now. We find the story goes on as Daniel is interpreting the different parts of the image. There was the head of gold, Babylon, the chest and the arms of silver, Medo-Persia. And in Daniel chapter 2, verse 39, he says, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. He says, King Nebuchadnezzar, there will be a third kingdom, the third kingdom of brass. What was the third empire that came onto the scene after the Medo-Persian Empire? And of course, we all know who it is. It's the kingdom of Greece. Greece reigned from 331 BC to 168 BC. And the reason why Greece came to power was because of a man, a famous man, by the name of Alexander the Great. He was a brilliant young general. He defeated Darius III of Persia at the Battle of Arbela. We are told in history that Alexander the Great had only 20,000 men. Darius III had 1 million, and they won the battle. He was a brilliant general. And by the age of about 30 years of age, Alexander the Great had conquered the then known world. He conquered the world. It was unheard of for such a a young general, such a powerful young general to conquer so much land, and he basically conquered the world by the age of about 30. But you know, friends, there's a story about Alexander the Great. After he conquered the world, we're told, he stood upon the shores of India. As he was standing upon the shores of India, he was looking out to sea. As he was looking out to sea, some of his generals that were standing behind him a little ways noticed that as he was standing there looking out to sea, that Alexander the Great began to weep. Now, if you know the history of Alexander the Great, friends, he doesn't weep. And as his generals were watching this, one of them mustered up enough courage to go up to Alexander the Great and ask him why he was weeping. His general came up. His general said, Alexander, you've just conquered the world. Why are you weeping? His reply was this. He said, I have just conquered the entire world. I have the world at my feet. He says, I have nothing left to live for. He'd conquered the world, friends, and he said, I have nothing left to live for. You see, friends, when you and I try and conquer the world, we find this world leaves us empty. Alexander the Great was able to conquer the world, but he couldn't conquer himself. His life was empty. His life was meaningless. And by the age of about 33 years of age, sadly, Alexander the Great, the one who conquered the world, couldn't conquer himself when he drank himself to death. Have you ever felt like Alexander the Great, friend? Trying to conquer the world, trying to get as much wealth, as much pleasures, as much toys and possessions as possible. You know, the world today, people are trying to conquer the world, aren't they? They're trying to make the money. They're trying to be rich and famous and powerful. But friends, how many times we see those who finally get to the top of the ladder, finally conquer the world, as it were, find out, as Alexander the Great did, that their life is empty, that their life is meaningless, that there is nothing left to live for. And just like Alexander the Great, they turned to alcohol. They turned to drugs. And many of them die at an early age. Friends, nothing satisfies in this world outside of a relationship with Jesus Christ. You know, friends, I was one of those people once, trying to make money, fame, fortune, trying to be strong, trying to be powerful. And I learnt that nothing satisfies other than Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter, friend, how large your sandcastle is on the beach. The tide always comes in and takes it away. Today people are building great mansions. They're building great empires. But friends, the tide will always come in and take it away. The only thing you can hang on to when that tide comes in is Jesus Christ. He will give you the peace, the satisfaction, and the longings of the human heart. He is the only one, my friend, that will satisfy your life. But now Daniel goes on. Daniel goes on in verse 40 and he says this, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. Here we find head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and